and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Archers when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on.
I'm awash with this stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavour show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of...
Welcome to The Debate. Today we're looking at a collision between the cold, hard memory of a community and the fragile hope of an individual's future. We are dissecting the situation in Borsetshire, involving Esme, a young farmer trying to secure her business, and George Grundy, who is, well, he's a polarizing figure looking for a job. It's a perfect case study in social economics, specifically the cost of redemption versus the value of reputation.
It is a classic standoff. You have Esme, who is, pivoting her entire business model, and George, who is desperate to pivot his life. But standing between them is this massive wall of reputation, gossip, and risk. It raises a really fundamental question about how economies, even small rural ones, handle what you might call damaged goods.
Precisely. And to understand the stakes, we need to set the context properly. Esme has just cleared a tuberculosis or TB scare on her farm. Now, for those unaware of the agricultural reality, a TB breakdown isn't just an animal health issue. It is a financial nightmare. It essentially freezes your cash flow. You're under movement restrictions. You can't sell stock. I mean, the administrative burden is just crushing. Esme has, to use her own words, worked her guts out to survive this. She is operating a distressed asset.
And that distress is what's driving the innovation. To build financial resilience, she's taking on this high-intensity sprint contract in web design. This is the gig economy meeting the agrarian economy. She needs cash fast to build a buffer.
Which means she physically cannot be in the milking parlor. So she needs to buy time, quite literally. She needs a farmhand. Enter George Grundy.
And enter the conflict. George applies for the job. But Esme's neighbor, Ruth Archer, issues this stark, unsolicited warning. Do not hire him. She cites his past unreliability and, his bad reputation at the local hub, the Bull.
While simultaneously, George's Aunt Susan is hosting a dinner party, a meal to heal, specifically designed to reintegrate George into the family fold. So the core question we are debating is this. When a livelihood is on the line, should you make decisions based on the hard data of a person's past track record? Or does the immediate evidence of talent and the social necessity of redemption outweigh all the risks?
All right, I'm taking the position of rehabilitation and opportunity. I'm going to argue that judging George on stale data creates a negative feedback loop. Esme's direct intuition about George's skills was positive, and Susan's strategy of looking to the future is the only way to, unlock value in a community. If you don't give people a path back, they become a permanent liability.
And I'm taking the position of prudence and risk management. I'll argue that Ruth Archer's warning represents valid market data. Esme is in a recovery phase. She cannot afford to gamble her farm's solvency on a known liability. In this specific context, forgiveness is a luxury Esme just cannot afford.
All right, let's start with your position then. Why is Ruth's intervention so critical to you? To me, it felt like interference.
It's not interference, it's due diligence. We have to strip away the sentimentality. Esme isn't running a charity, she is running a business that just nearly collapsed. She explicitly mentions looking for resilience. In economic terms, she is incredibly risk-averse right now because her capital buffer is gone. When Ruth Archer steps in, she isn't just gossiping over the fence. She is providing a credit check.
But a credit check based on what? Rumor or actual performance?
Based on behavioral history, Ruth lists 3 distinct, verifiable data points. 1, George went AWOL from Bridge Farm, a previous employer, during a crisis. He walked off the job. 2, he is banned from the Bull. Now, in Borsetshire, the Bull isn't just a pub. It's the central node of social networking. It's the town square. Being banned from there, it signals a deep breach of the social contract. And 3, he doesn't drive.
Which he was honest about.
Honest or not, in a rural economy, that is a massive logistical deficit. If a cow is calving at 3 in the morning, you can't wait for a lift. Ruth sums it up perfectly. Esme needs a safe pair of hands. Hiring George is introducing volatility into a system that requires stability. It's like buying a stock with high variance when you really need a bond.
I understand the risk assessment, I really do, but I think your ledger is missing the asset column entirely. You are framing this as safety versus danger. I see it as stagnation versus innovation. If we look at the actual interview, before Ruth interfered, what happened? Esme didn't just tolerate George, she was impressed by him. She called his offer brilliant.
She was likely desperate and just reacting to a warm body in the room.
No, she was recognizing a synergy that Ruth is, too traditional to see. This is where the details really matter. George revealed he has a drone. He films landscapes. He understands digital content. Remember, Esme is taking a sprint contract in web design. She isn't just looking for a laborer to shovel manure. She is looking for a proxy who understands her world.
I think you're overstating the value of the drone. It's a farm job.
Is it just a farm job, though? Esme is a modern farmer diversifying into tech. George is tech literate. He speaks her language. Ruth is judging him by 20th century standards. Can he drive a tractor and turn up on time? Esme needs a 21st century collaborator. If George can capture drone footage for Esme's web clients while checking the herd, he's providing double the value of a regular farmhand. That is an efficiency gain you are completely ignoring.
But utility is useless without reliability. That is a fundamental disconnect, isn't it? It doesn't matter if George is a drone wizard or a web design genius if he doesn't show up for the morning milking because he's moody or, hungover.
But that assumption that he won't show up is based on the past, not the present. This is the concept of signaling. George signaled his maturity by front-loading the negative information about his driving ban. He didn't hide it, he owned it. Susan says it best at the dinner party, we have to look to the future, not the past. My position is that the strongest argument for employment is current utility. If Esme listens to Ruth, she is discarding a highly qualified candidate based on reputation lag. She is letting the community's memory override her own eyes.
And that brings us right to the heart of the first major clash, the reliability of community intelligence versus direct interaction. You call it reputation lag, I call it community due diligence.
It feels more like a whisper network designed to keep people in their place. A cartel of opinion, really.
It is a protective mechanism. Look at the context. Ruth tells Esme, there's folk around here who won't take kindly to you employing him. Now you can view that as a threat, or you can view it as a description of the market reality. Boar's share is a tight ecosystem. Social capital matters. Esme notes she is finally getting somewhere with her neighbors. If she hires the town pariah, she burns social capital. That is a tangible cost to her business. She risks alienation from the established network, the Archers, the Aldridges.
But that is exactly why Ruth is dangerous here. She is poisoning the well. Esme had a direct sensory experience with George. He was polite, he brought a CV, he showed initiative. Ruth overrides that primary data with secondary gossip. And I want to go back to the sprint contract. You mentioned Esme is under pressure.
Intense pressure. She says, I can't do 2 full-time jobs at once.
Exactly. So she needs someone who understands the pressure of the tech world. A traditional, old-school farmhand might be reliable, sure, but they won't understand why Esme is glued to a screen and can't be disturbed.
Introducing the Archer's mug, where elegance meets everyday comfort. Crafted from premium white ceramic, designed with vibrant peekaboo colors inside, simple, modern, and stylish. Start your day the Archer's way, with warmth, familiarity, and the comfort of voices you've come to love. As the stories unfold on the Archers, let this mug become part of your daily ritual, a small reminder of life in Ambridge. Practical for every home, dishwasher and microwave safe. Available in 2 sizes, 11 ounces and 15 ounces, designed to fit your lifestyle. Enjoy your favorite drink in a mug that connects you to Britain's most beloved countryside story, The Archers. For more information and to order your very own The Archers mug, Follow the link below and make it part of your daily routine.
George does. He is the ideal cultural fit. Ruth's interference prevents Esme from capitalizing on a unique market efficiency just because George made some mistakes at Bridge Farm years ago. It's inefficient to hold onto that data forever.
Mistakes is a generous term for breach of contract. But let's follow your logic. You're saying his cultural fit overrides the risk of him walking out? I disagree. The downside risk here is asymmetric. This is a crucial economic concept. If George succeeds, Esme gets her contract done. Good. If George fails, if he goes AWOL again, Esme loses the web contract and risks a welfare issue on the farm. The cost of failure is catastrophic. It could end her business. Ruth is simply pointing out that the probability of failure, based on historical data, is high.
But probabilities change based on environment. If you put a person in a supportive environment, their reliability score goes up. And this leads to our second point, the rituals of reintegration. We have to contrast Ruth's rejection with Susan's dinner party, because that meal to heal was a masterclass in behavioral engineering.
It was certainly theatrical. I'm not sure I'd call it engineering.
It was strategic. Susan explicitly set out to use cooperative rituals to lower tension. I mean, think about the salad. It wasn't just food, it was a mechanism. Passing the bowls, sharing the lasagna, these are physical acts of cooperation. Susan recognized a fundamental truth. If you treat people like outcasts, they behave like outcasts. If you include them in the ritual of the meal, they step up.
Did they step up, though? George was terrified. He told Amber, his partner, they still think I'm a waste of space.
And that fear is the direct result of the Ruth Archer approach. He feels the stigma. But look at what Susan did to break it. This is the key moment for me. Susan and Neil knew that Amber was pregnant. She had already told them. But when George and Amber announced it at the table, what did Susan do? She feigned surprise. She acted as if she was hearing it for the very first time.
Which I found fascinating. You call it a masterclass, I might call it, necessary deception to keep the peace.
It was a gift of agency. By pretending not to know, they allowed George and Amber to own their news. They validated their status as adults. Susan prioritized the relationship over being in the know. That is how you build loyalty. Ruth, by contrast, prioritizes the record. She's preserving the past. Susan is building the infrastructure for the future. She is creating a safe harbor where George can actually mature.
I agree it was a skilled maneuver and it shows high emotional intelligence. But we have to distinguish between family dynamics and business dynamics. Susan is dealing with a sunk cost. George's family. She has to make it work. The cost of failure at the dinner party is an awkward silence or a cold lasagna. The cost of failure for Esme is the solvency of her business.
You are underestimating the emotional labor Susan is doing. She is actively reconstructing George's self-image.
I'm acknowledging it, but I'm asking if it's scalable to an employer. Even within the family, the trust is fragile. George admits that Clary and others called the pregnancy irresponsible and a terrible mistake. Susan is an outlier. She's engaging in high-effort management to prop George up. Can we really expect Esme, a neighbor just trying to pay her bills, to engage in that same level of therapeutic management? Esme needs an employee, not a rehabilitation project. She doesn't have the bandwidth to be Susan.
But the job is the rehabilitation. That's the catch-22. George says, I just want to be back in my local, except they still think I'm a waste of space. He craves the normalization that comes with work. He wants to be a productive citizen.
Thus to the third and perhaps most critical economic point, the economics of the clean slate. You seem to view the clean slate as a right that George is owed by the community. I view it as a luxury good that Esme cannot afford to purchase.
A luxury good? That's a cynical way to view a second chance.
It's a realistic view. Esme is building a cushion. She talks about financial resilience against TB outbreaks. She is risk-adverse by necessity. A clean slate, ignoring past bad debts, social or financial, is something you can afford to offer when you are flush with capital. When you are on the edge, like Esme, you cannot afford the variance. You need the sure thing.
I think the material gives us a beautiful metaphor for this, actually. Look at the consumption habits in the episode.
Go on.
When Ruth visits Esme, what do they drink? An Australian white.
A reliable choice. Crisp, standard.
Exactly. It's a global commodity. Consistent, finished, bottled, risk-free. You know exactly what it will taste like before you open it. It's a product of established trade. That is what Ruth represents, and that is what Esme wants. A finished product, a worker who works, no surprises.
And Susan?
Susan serves the cooperative salad. It's messy. It's homemade. It requires assembly at the table. It requires participation. You have to pass the bowl. You have to engage.
That's a brilliant observation. The Australian white versus the cooperative salad. One is passive consumption of quality. The other is active creation of community.
And right now, Esme is reaching for the wine. She wants the easy finished product. But my argument is that by doing so, she is actively harming the local economy's future. George is about to become a father. This is the moment of lock-in.
Meaning?
Meaning his trajectory is being set now. If he gets this job, utilizes his drone skills, and feels respected by a peer like Esme, he likely stabilizes. He enters the economy as a producer. If he is rejected because of Ruth's whisper network, he spirals. He remains the waste of space they fear. Susan's dinner party proved that when you change the input, when you treat them with respect, you change the output. The clean slate isn't a luxury, it's an infrastructure investment. If the community doesn't invest in George now, they will pay for his delinquency later.
That is a valid sociological point for a government planner or a family matriarch. But let's bring it back to Esme's ledger. You are asking Esme to subsidize that infrastructure investment with her own private risk. She asks Ruth, how would you and David feel if I took him on? She is terrified of being knocked off course. You are asking her to bet the farm, literally, on the hope that George rises to the occasion.
I'm asking her to bet on her own instinct. She liked him. She saw the talent. I am asking her to trust her own eyes rather than Ruth's memory. Innovation requires ignoring longitudinal data sometimes. If you only hire people who fit the mold, you never get the drone pilot, you never get the new efficiency, you just get the same old patterns.
And I am saying that her eyes saw a polite 15-minute interview. Ruth's memory holds years of data. In business, you ignore longitudinal data at your peril. A drone pilot who is hungover is just a guy with a toy he can't fly.
But he wasn't hungover. He was eager. He was trying.
He has been in the past. That's the point. The clean slate assumes the past is irrelevant. My position argues the past is the best predictor of the future. Esme needs to focus entirely on her contract. She doesn't have the bandwidth to monitor George. If he goes AWOL, she fails.
And if she listens to Ruth, she fails to grow. She hires some safe, boring pair of hands, and the drone sits in its case, and the farm remains stuck in the past. She misses the opportunity to modernize because she listened to the old guard.
Better to be stuck in the past and solvent than innovative and bankrupt.
I suppose that is the fundamental divide. The fear of losing what you have versus the courage to build what you could have.
Let's move to our conclusion because we are sort of circling the drain of this dilemma. From my perspective, as the advocate for prudence, Ruth's intervention is harsh, yes. It feels unkind, but it is necessary. The rural economy is unforgiving. One TB outbreak, one failed contract, and you are under. Esme is seeking financial resilience. George Grundy represents volatility. The wrong moves of the past have consequences. It is not Esme's job to fix George. It is her job to secure her farm. Ruth is simply acting as a responsible board member, advising against a high-risk merger.
And as the dissenter, I maintain that this is a classic case of wasted potential due to stigma. We have a young man with specific high-tech skills that match the employer's needs perfectly. We have a family, led by Susan, doing the hard work of social repair. By intervening, Ruth is essentially enforcing a caste system that keeps George down and denies Esme a potentially brilliant employee. Susan's meal to heal proves that people rise to the level of expectation you set for them. If Esme dismisses George, she protects her short-term comfort but fails the long-term test of community building.
It really comes down to that gap, doesn't it? The gap between who a person was and who they are trying to become.
And the risk required by others, whether it's passing a salad bowl or signing an employment contract, to bridge that gap. The community demands responsibility from George, but seems unwilling to give him the tools to exercise it.
A fascinating case study in the economics of second chances. We hope this debate has given you, the listener, a new lens through which to view these difficult decisions in Borsetshire.
Indeed. Whether you are Team Ruth or Team Susan, there is always more to explore in the material.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
Goodbye.
So, what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just moving mics around.
So, what do you do?
I do the spot effects on the arches. Any
Are you what we
movements
call Foley then?
and- kind of. Yep.
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production.
Yep. That's the ball bar.
This one.
Yep. That's.
Haley so wanted to be in their own place when their baby came. It's due in 2 months. Not much chance of that now. No. I mean, it would have been a stretch for them financially, mind, but I just wish there was something practical I could do to help them, Caroline.
I think The Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community at whatever